that you are able to see my screen. Great, thank you so much. So good afternoon and welcome on behalf of Smart Commute. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar on Winter Cycling 101, Skills, Gear, and Safe Riding Strategies. My name is Luca, and I am the Smart Commute Coordinator here at the City of Toronto, and today we are joined with our presenters Felicity and Cassie, who will be coordinating today's session from EnviroCenter. I'll help us guide us through the agenda, the discussion, while Jesse from Point A will keep things interactive by managing the chat, hosting polls between speakers, and running today's gift card draw. Before we begin, we will start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So today's agenda. Just a quick housekeeping note, today's webinar will be fully recorded and the recording will be available afterwards on the Smart Commute website, so don't worry if you need to step away and want to revisit part of the discussion later. So we will begin with an introduction to the Smart Commute program, followed by our webinar presentation, a quick Q&A, and then finishing off with what is to come for the rest of our Winter Commute Month campaign and a quick gift card draw for a lucky winner. So about the Smart Commute program. What is the Smart Commute program? The Smart Commute program is an initiative in Ontario that empowers possibilities for how people commute through sustainable commuting programs. Smart Commute is supported and implemented by municipalities across Ontario, including various municipalities of the GTA, the City of London, the City of Greater Sudbury, as well as Bruce County. The program provides workplaces, schools, and the public with services and solutions for a better and more sustainable commute. Some of our program services include Carpool Ride Matching app, the Emergency Ride Home program, Smart Commute campaigns, cycling programs, commuter assessments, and much more. So some pre-webinar questions. Some pre-webinar questions will pop up into the chat momentarily, and we'll give you all some time to respond to those before commencing with our presentation.
In the meantime, we can have our guest speakers set up their presentation.
So I'll be handing it over to Cassie and Felicity from EnviroCenter.
All right, can we do the thumbs up that you can all see my screen? I'm seeing some thumbs up. All right, over to you, Cassie.
Great. Jesse, did you want us to go ahead or were you going to wrap up the poll?
You can go ahead.
Okay. Well, wonderful. It's so great to be here and to be talking about winter cycling on a nice wintry February day. Felicity and I are joining you today from Ottawa, and thanks for the great land acknowledgement, Luca. I just wanted to take one quick moment to acknowledge that Ottawa, where we're joining from, is the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And to begin, I'm going to tell you a little bit about EnviroCenter. So we are a nonprofit organization that works in Eastern Ontario. We've been around since 1999 and have a team of over 70 staff. We specialize in practical solutions to reduce emissions. And to do this, we work in 4 key areas: home energy efficiency, sustainable transportation, green infrastructure, and waste and circular economy. These are the sectors where human choices have the greatest impact on climate change and where organizations feel the pressure most directly. And in line with our sustainable transportation work, we are big proponents of winter cycling, and being in Ottawa, where we have pretty significant winters, that is a really important thing for us to be talking about. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, So I've been cycling in Ottawa since 2013, and this is my 4th winter cycling year-round, actually following a workshop just like this. So that really gave me the tools and the skills and the motivation to become a year-round cyclist, and I love to be doing that. And at EnviroCenter, I am the strategic lead for transportation. And when I'm not working, you can often find me around the city riding one of my 2 cargo bikes so that I can squeeze everything into my day, including all of this stuff and my 2 children. And now I'll turn it over to Felicity.
Right, and you are not seeing double. Cassie and I have very similar profiles. We get mistaken for each other occasionally. I've been in cycling in Ottawa for over a decade, and this is my 10th year cycling in the winter. Um, for me, my entry point into cycling and winter cycling was because it was the most affordable option to get me around. And now I have 2 kids and also 2 cargo bikes, and I help support other people to make that change as well. So my role at EnviroCenter is as the project lead for sustainable transportation projects. So I work up more on the programming side. Um, at EnviroCenter, we try to root all of our ground all of our work in positive psychology and positivity. So before we jump into what it means to ride in the winter, we're going to ground ourselves in a bit of positivity of what cycling can bring as benefits. So we know that, of course, switching from a car to a sustainable mode of transportation like cycling brings us cleaner air and water through lower greenhouse gas emissions, lower tire particles. We also know that it can bring exercise into our daily life, which is especially challenging as someone with 2 kids. I don't have the time to go out exercise separately, but I can bike my kids to the grocery store, and that is my exercise. Lower transportation costs versus driving a car. And then there are some other less measurable benefits. So having more cycling in your neighborhood or cycling in your neighborhood more frequently helps experience your neighborhood in a different way. So you start to see the smaller changes as you go through the season. And so experiencing, what a tree looks like as it changes and through the different seasons, or hearing the first signs and smelling the first smells of spring after the winter. You also get the chance to sort of stop and chat with a neighbor or see a friend on the bike path and get to wave to them or pull over and see a bunny rabbit that you haven't seen for a while. So there's all these very measurable and less measurable, but extremely important benefits that really bring myself, and I will speak on behalf of Cassie, back to cycling as our primary mode of transportation. And we hope that this workshop can inspire some of you to do the same. Now, when it comes to winter, yes, we are in Ottawa where it is very cold and very snowy, but even then, it's not so bad. We have in Ottawa about 12 days per year where the snowfall is over 5 centimeters, which includes yesterday. So we're currently cleaning up after a bit of a snowfall. Our snow usually sticks around from the end of October, from the end of November until mid to end March. And once the snow starts melting, we tend to find that it melts faster on the roads and the pathways. And so those free up before the snow is all gone. So our riding season is actually quite a bit longer than necessarily the season where snow is on the ground. In terms of the cold, our average daytime high up here is -5 degrees Celsius, which is a lovely temperature to be outside and moving around in, as all of these people in this image can attest to, who are skating out on the canal, probably around -10 degrees Celsius on that day. And I know that a lot of you are joining us from Southern Ontario, and so your conditions will be even a little bit more accessible, so a little bit warmer, a little bit less snow, sticking around for a little bit less time for the most part. And so there are many beautiful days all year round, even when you're facing those wintry conditions. We like to encourage people to consider cycling on the blue sky days when there's clear roads, as opposed to viewing winter cycling as just dealing with snow and facing those wintry conditions. So when I first wanted to get into winter cycling, I found that there were sort of two extremes when it came to people approaching cycling. On the one extreme, I was told that I could bike really fast and cut through the snow and I would be fine. And I was not fine with that approach. That approach did not work for me. And on the other hand, sorry, um, there are often long articles or lists with all sorts of details of what gear is needed in order to combat winter and prepare yourself for the elements. And that also seemed fairly extreme to me. Once you added up all of the items on the list, it could run into the thousands of dollars. And as a poor, at the time, recently graduated student, I couldn't afford that either. And so I felt that there had to be a middle point. So when I encourage people to cycle, really what it boils down to is three necessities. You need three things in order to cycle year round, including in the winter. The first one is a bike that you're comfortable riding. And comfortable can mean a few different things. It needs to be comfortable for you to be riding in the clothing that you're going to be wearing. And you need to be comfortable with the fact that you will be riding it in snowy conditions. And the fact that there is salt within that snow. So there might be some damage onto your bike. Many people will choose to go for a second bike that's used so that damage doesn't feel quite so bad as if you were using your very expensive summer bike in the winter. But you can also reduce some of that salt impact by going for a bike that is less impacted by salt. So things with, think aluminum, for example. Um, Comfort can also mean making sure that your bike matches what you're wearing. So flat pedals allow you to wear your comfortable winter boots as opposed to having to get separate footwear. We strongly recommend looking for a bike with fenders or finding a way to add fenders to a bike. This not only helps you feel more comfortable with the spray going up your face, this line up the back, and then it also protects your gears. So a good set of front fenders that go down sort of closer to the ground will help prevent your gears from getting some of that salty spray and will help lower your maintenance needs down the line. Now, comfort for you might be that you would prefer to have a fat bike, which has better traction when there's some deeper snow or some bigger snowfalls. And certainly a day like we were having today in Ottawa, the fat bikers are getting around just fine. And it's a little bit more challenging for those of us who don't actually have fat bikes. But it might not be necessary if you're only riding on those clearer days. And then the last piece to consider for a sort of entry level bike is lights. Of course, it's much darker in the winter compared to the summer, and so you do need to make sure that your lighting situation is prepared. Um, in Ontario, the minimum requirements are to have a white light on the front and a red light or reflector on the back between 30 minutes before sunset and 30 minutes after sunrise. An additional thing to consider is that white light on the front needs to remain steady, whereas the red light on the back may flash. The one on the front needs to be steady. You really do want it to be steady. It's much easier to judge the speed and distance of a vehicle that's moving when there's a steady light than if it's flashing. Um, the other thing to keep in mind is how bright that light is. And so a lot of people will go for the brightest light possible. But if that light is pointed improperly, it might actually be going into the eyes of drivers or other road users, and that makes you less visible. So make sure your light is pointed down so it's illuminating the ground and not blinding people who are trying to be able to see you. Now that's your minimum. You can get very creative with your light setup and add extra lights at the front or back. You can add Christmas lights. So I have a little string of Christmas lights here. They're battery powered. It adds just a little extra spark of joy, especially around Christmas time. You can also look for spoke lights or spoke reflectors, extra reflectors along the sides, anything to increase the visibility of your bike as you're moving around, um, and helping people be able to see you in those darker conditions. And before I move on to the next slide, sometimes visibility is not necessarily related to how dark it is outside. If there's a snowfall or sleet, then you want to make sure that those lights are charged and available for those conditions as well. So that's your first piece that you need to think about, finding that bike that fits your comfort needs. The second piece is the clothing. And here you want to be looking for clothing that will keep you warm and dry and that you are comfortable moving your body in. And for most people, this doesn't need to be anything special or separate. You probably have some of that already in your closet. When I first started riding, I actually went with several layers of wool sweater and then a raincoat over top and a very inexpensive pair of splash pants on the bottom with lots of layers underneath. So I was not making use of fancy cycling gear. I was just using what I had in my closet already. If you're going to be riding a regular or analog bike, so a non-electric bike, you will probably warm up pretty quickly. So be prepared to shed some layers. I like to have a basket at the front of my bike to throw mittens into or scarves, and then they're at the ready for when I need to put them back on because I cool down a little bit. Your clothes will be encountering slush and salt as along with your bike. So just sort of be conscious of that when you're choosing your clothing. You can get specific items like gaiters, which cover the bottom half of your legs, so your shins down to your feet, and that helps catch some of the muck that gets sprayed up from your tires. My personal preference, I just go for a pair of mucklucks, which has a higher rise on the boot, and that sort of catches the snow and slush as opposed to it going on my clothing. For boots, it's really useful to have a pair of boots that are both warm and flexible. So I mentioned mucklucks, that's one good option. Other popular options in Ottawa are bogs or blundstones with a pair of wool socks on the inside to be both waterproof and dry. Really wide boots like moon boots or sorels tend to be more challenging for winter cycling because the pedal size is much smaller than the boot, and so you have a bit of a challenge to try and actually find the pedal with your boots. So looking for something that's a little bit closer, still very warm, still waterproof, but you can put a wool sock in there for those colder days. In terms of your hands, that's another place that people often get quite cold. Most people probably have a pair of mittens or gloves that will be fairly comfortable to use, but you can consider upgrading to a heated glove, for example. Those are very popular when skiing. Or there's some specialty gloves which sort of separate your fingers into, a Vulcan salute, and those are called lobster claw gloves. And those allow you the flexibility to change gears or to brake while still having a bit more warmth than a pair of gloves would. I actually stick with mittens because I find them warmer and easier to put a hand warmer in. I've got a set of hand warmers here, which I keep at home for those cold days. Um, my gears change by twisting, so I don't need the extra flexibility of having a separate index finger. So for me, mittens work quite well, but your experience will vary depending on your bike. The other place that people often miss when they're considering their warmth is their eyes. So your eyes can get very, very cold and are exposed to wind and precipitation and glare from the snow if it's a very snowy, bright day. Because of this, many people will switch to a ski helmet in the winter because you can add a set of ski goggles. So I have my ski helmet here, I have my ski goggles. And again, many people will already have this at home, so it makes for an easy switch if that's the case. Ski helmets also have the benefit of being insulated on the ears, so you don't need to wear an additional hat necessarily unless it's very cold. The downside with the ski helmet choice is that most ski helmets are not rated for a fall on asphalt. There are some that are, so you can certainly see. You can't see the demo. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll just describe then. Um, I hope I described it sufficiently. But if not, I can revisit that at the end. Most ski helmets are not rated for collisions on asphalt, so you might lose a little bit of protection that way. The flip side is that a bike helmet that is not properly fitted over layers of hat is also not going to protect you in the same way that it would in the summer. So there's a bit of a balancing act to walk in terms of comfort, warmth, and safety. There are ski helmets that are rated now for falls on concrete, and so you can certainly look for those as an option. If you're going for the ski helmet, then goggles or safety goggles or sunglasses will help protect your eyes as well. Um, all right, so we've got covered 2 out of the 3 pieces. We've got the bike that you are comfortable riding, the clothing that keeps you comfortable, and then the third piece is a route. And this is often the biggest challenge, um, depending on the municipality and the supports available. So I know that this workshop is coming from with people from a lot of different places. So I would encourage you right now, I would invite you to actually put some of the resources that you are aware of into the chat with the city or municipality that it's related to so that you can share those with other people on the call. If you're not sure where to start in terms of finding routes and finding out whether a route is cleared in the winter or not, your local city's cycling maps are a good starting point often, or asking colleagues and neighbors who already ride in the winter which routes they prefer using and for what reasons. Looking at your community's social media via whichever hashtag is most commonly used. And then you can also potentially reach out to local cycling groups, bike shops, or your local city councilor's office who might have some resources for you. Once you have a route, you need to be sure that you're comfortable with that route and that it will actually serve your needs. And so we strongly recommend trying it before you actually need it. Your comfort level might differ from someone else's comfort level, and so you can take on that on board that advice from colleagues and neighbors about what they use, but it's always worth trying it yourself before you actually need it. So like, try your commute the Sunday before you need it on the Monday, for example. Now in Ottawa, we do have the benefit of a winter cleared cycling network, which is 60 kilometers of dedicated cycling route that is cleared for the purposes of cycling. However, I don't actually have a number of this, but it's an estimated 100-ish kilometers of cleared multi-use pathways that are cleared for pedestrian access. So this massively increases the potential routes for those of us in Ottawa. And you might have some multi-use pathways in your community that are cleared for pedestrian access. And of course, if they're multi-use pathways, you can still use them for cycling even in the winter. So some examples of where a multi-use pathway might be cleared would be school routes, cut-throughs between neighborhoods that enable cross-neighborhood connection, access routes to major employers. Our major hospital here, for example, has quite a large multi-use pathway connection that is cleared so that the students from the nearby community can access. Post-secondary educational institutions, access to malls, and major transit stations. So these are the types of routes to be aware of because they are more likely to be cleared with access for access for pedestrians that you can then also cycle on. And then speaking of transit access, that's actually a really great way to build a little bit of cycling into your day when you don't need to go fully from A to B by bike. So many of our stations in Ottawa have access routes that are cleared in the winter, which allows us to get to the station, and then you can either lock your bike at the station, or in Ottawa, we have our rack and roll program with 2 spaces for bikes at the front of the bus, which are maintained all year round now. So you could put your bike on the bus or on our train when it's running at slightly higher capacity. And it allows you to cover those longer distances that wouldn't necessarily be either possible or comfortable in the winter. So this gives a few different options for how to tackle your route planning when it's not as certain if you're going to be comfortable on the full trip. So now we've covered some of the basics, the 3 things that need to be kept in mind. We'll talk a little bit about what it actually feels like to ride in winter and on those wintry conditions. So in Ottawa, we do get a lot of snow. We also have a pretty significant freeze-thaw cycle, so there's often a layer of ice underneath all of that snow that has to be contended with. So there's a couple of types of snow that I'm going to introduce you to before moving into the contents on the slide. There's white snow and there's brown snow. White snow usually behaves the way you might think it will. If it's soft and fluffy, it's fairly easy to cut through. If it's heavy and thick and wet, then it's going to be a bit of a slog. And if it's packed down to a hard surface, then it's actually quite easy to ride on. Brown snow, which is also known as snert, which is a combination of snow and dirt, is extremely challenging to ride on and moves in all sorts of different directions that you would not expect. So it's a mix of freshly fallen snow with motor oil and gunk and dirt, and it can freeze in layers and can often pile up, and you're not entirely sure what direction your bike is going to move when riding on snert. So generally speaking, the recommendation is to try and avoid riding on that brown snow whenever possible. In Ontario, cyclists legally are allowed to ride as far right as practicable. That practicable is a little bit up for interpretation. And if the far right of a residential street, for example, is full of fairly thick, deep brown snow, I will quite happily ride in the center of a residential street, sometimes even the opposite lane of a residential street, and just pull over when needed to let other drivers pass so that I can keep moving forward. When it comes to riding on like more comfortable snow, the white snow or ice, you sort of approach that the same way that you might approach walking or driving in those conditions. So being very gentle with your brakes, gentle turning your bike. One of my top tips is to turn your handlebars first and let the bike follow behind you. That means you're not leaning and having less contact with the ground and changing your center of gravity. So trying to stay as upright as possible with as much contact between your tire and the ground as possible, and that will help keep you upright. Downshifting to an easier gear will help keep you moving forward, and actually having a good amount of weight on your rear tire will also help. So standing up in your pedals is not recommended. You want to be really firmly seated in your seat with lots of weight on the rear tire, and that will help. Even if you have to go into the easiest possible gear, you will still be moving forward as opposed to having that tire spinning out on you every time you try and push down. Um, Studded tires are really useful if you have a lot of icy conditions. And specifically, a studded tire on the front tire is what will keep you upright. And this is sometimes counterintuitive because I just mentioned all of that about the back tire needing to have pressure to keep you moving forward. But the front tire is where your balance point is. If your rear tire slips, you can usually catch it. If the front tire slips, it's really challenging to save a front tire skid, especially on ice. So we strongly recommend that if you are going to be riding in icy conditions, to consider investing in a studded tire that can go on that front wheel. And these now come in a huge variety of different sizes. You can reach out to your local bike shop. There's a good chance that if they don't have it in stock, they would be able to order one for you. And for everybody who is riding in challenging conditions, there is always the option if you are able to get off and walk. So this might mean that you're walking on the sidewalk for a block or so to get to an easier route or to cross a particularly challenging patch. Might be that the snowplow has plowed a large pile of snow across your way, and so you need to get off and carry your bike over it. These are absolutely challenges that we face in the winter. But it's not, I sometimes feel like it feels like you're being defeated by winter if you have to get off and walk when you're riding your bike in the winter. And it's not the case at all. It's simply part of the fun and part of the challenge. Now, one of the big challenges of riding in winter is salt. And it really does cause some pretty major damage to bikes if left unattended and without a bit of maintenance. So you can ask your bike shop to do some pre-winter maintenance, which will help lubricate some of those harder to reach pieces and keep it in good condition through the winter season. But there's some stuff that you can do yourself as well. Cleaning any excess snow or dirt after each ride. The screen says a good bang, so lifting it up and banging it down on the ground if your bike is light enough to do that. My bike is not light enough to do that, so I usually kick my wheels and give them a good kick to try and get as much of that snow out from under the fenders as possible before I put it back into my garage. You can also, if you already clean and lubricate your chain and know how to do that, you want to do it a little bit more frequently to avoid some of that buildup and some of that rust. You can also go a little bit more to the lazy maintenance side and just know that there is going to be parts that will need to be replaced on your bike as they rust out. So the main culprits are chain, gears, and cables. And I went a few years where I did this in the spring. I would ride my bike through the summer, fall, winter, and then come spring again, I would change out all of the cables, the gears, and the chain, and then the cycle would continue for another year. I know myself very well, and I know that I am not able to commit to regular maintenance of my own. And so this was an approach that was accessible to me, and it helped keep me riding my bike through the winter. Now, this was not a bike that I was concerned with having some rust buildup on. So if that is the case for you, then having a second bike is quite common for people. Get that second used bike, that a little bit of rust buildup will not be as heartbreaking when you need to replace some of those parts. Another little top tip before I move on is storing your bike in a colder area so that the freeze thaw cycle doesn't happen. So salt it's on its own and snow on its own are not necessarily the challenges. It's when the snow melts and carries the salt into all of the parts that it's melting. That is really the challenge. So if you're able to keep your bike in a colder area and stop some of that thawing process, then it will also help reduce your maintenance needs over the winter. So if you're ready to try to dip your toe into the icy waters, a good place to start is to ride with some friends. So looking for a local group that rides together will help encourage you to take the plunge, so to speak, before needing to sort of commit to it by yourself. If you're considering buying a fat bike, I strongly recommend trying one by renting one beforehand. They ride a little bit differently and they are more challenging to pedal. So it's worth trying before investing because it is a fairly large investment. Start small, pick a beautiful day and a route that you know you'll be able to do. And give that a go before committing to something a little bit bigger. And especially don't commit to that something bigger when you have to meet a deadline. So when you need to do your commute for the first time, for example. Give yourself some grace if it's your first time. I consider anybody who has ridden a bike in winter conditions to be a winter cyclist, even if those winter conditions were blue sky, warmer temperatures, and clear roads. You're doing great. And for those of you who are committed and are ready to invest, but would like to have some lower maintenance or a little bit of an easier time, here are some ideas for upgrades. An internally geared bike won't have those external gears that are vulnerable to rust accumulation. So you can see the bike in the photo here. It actually has 8 speeds, but you can't tell because they're all within the hub, and that protects those gears from salt incursion. Dynamo lights are built into your bike and actually run off magnetic power generated from the wheels as they turn. So that means there's no charging your lights. It means there's no remembering your lights. They're right there ready when you need them. For brakes, an upgrade to V brakes would be a disc brake, and those are increasingly common on many bikes, and so they're very, very powerful. But coaster and drum brakes are also good options because they're internal either to the crankshaft or to the wheel hub itself, and so they're less vulnerable to slushy and salty conditions. Belt drives or full chain guards are a lower maintenance option versus a metal chain. A belt drive is made of carbon fiber, so has nothing in it that could rust. And something to keep in mind there is that both of those options need to be combined with an internal gear hub or a single speed, so they don't work with an external gear set. And then finally, one of the easier updates, relatively speaking, are pogies or bar mitts, and you can see those in the photo here as well. It's the orange covers on the handlebars. That's going to add an extra set of gloves on top of your handlebars, which means that you can actually wear a slightly thinner glove underneath, and so your access to your brakes and your gears is going to be a little bit easier while still staying very warm. And those are available for all different types of handlebar sizes and shapes. And now finally, if you are interested in learning a bit more, if you want some more resources, feel free to check out our winter cycling guide. It's available on our website. I think Cassie will put the link into the chat. You can learn an awful lot from friends, family, and colleagues. I certainly haven't covered everything here, and I haven't covered anything specific to your municipality. And so reaching out to those folks who already are out there riding will be a fabulous resource for you. Reaching out to some of the cycling groups and joining them to build that community. And then if you have any specific questions that we haven't answered or been able to answer today, you can always email us at transport@envirocentre.ca. And with that, I will say thank you so much for joining us and for inviting us to be here to present. That does leave us with a few minutes for questions. And so if there are any questions, I would be very happy to answer them. Luca, would you like me to stop sharing and flip it back over to you?
Sure, I can finish up the presentation and then we can leave the last 5 to 10 minutes or so for questions. Okay, great. And could I just have confirmation once more that you can all see my screen? Perfect. So thank you so much to Felicity and Cassie from EnviroCenter for that great presentation. And now we'll just wrap up our presentation with what's next. So what's next for the Smart Commute program? So February is Winter Commute Month. So you can log all of your sustainable commutes and trips during the month from the 1st to the 28th on the Smart Commute app for a chance to win one of five $100 gift cards. And you can do this by visiting the Smart Commute website, and you can view all pricing rules and more information about how you can participate. And our Winter Commute Month webinars. So we have one remaining webinar for this month titled Know Before You Go with Municipal 511. And this webinar will take place in 2 weeks from today on February 25th from 12 noon to 1 p.m. And our presenters from Transnomis will be showcasing their 511 app, which is a handy tool that can be used by all Ontario drivers. So thank you once again for attending the webinar, and we're just going to wrap up now with some post-webinar questions. So if Jesse has those poll questions or questions to wrap up from the presentation, those should be showing up on your screens momentarily.
Perfect. So while we're waiting for that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Luca, do you want to talk about the gift card prize?
Yep, sure, Jesse, I can totally do that. So we want to give a special thanks to the City of London for generously donating today's webinar gift card prize. And the gift card prize will be given out to a lucky random participant from today's webinar, and it will be a $20 Tim Hortons gift card. After the prize has been drawn and the winner has been selected, please stay on the webinar and put your email information into the chat so that we can contact you and facilitate your prize. Thanks, Jesse.
Okay. All right, I'll take it away from here. So here's my screen. As you can see, everyone who's attended this webinar right now has a chance to win. So I'm going to go ahead and spin the wheel. All right. Ooh. And now we got Aaron Shacklet. So congrats, Aaron, for winning the $20 gift card prize. Clap, 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 applause. Okay, perfect. I'll email you after the presentation. Everyone who's registered, I have your email addresses, so I'll just email you, Aaron, to talk about next steps.
Awesome. Congratulations, Aaron, and thanks again for all of you for joining us. So from Smart Commute this February, we encourage you to rethink your routine, add movement into your day, and share your experience with colleagues in your community. Thank you to EnviroCenter, and have a great rest of your lunch hour, everyone.
Oh, but before we go, if you have any questions, we're gonna do the Q&A now. So if you have any questions, you want to speak about it, just raise your hand. I'll give you mic access. Otherwise, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and Cassie and Felicity will kind of answer those.
We have a Q&A that just came in from Ryan about recommendations to get a bike with an internal gear hub, belt drive, coaster brakes, etc.
I would say reach out to your local bike shop and see what they could recommend. There's if you're willing to sort of spend that that investment on a new bike, your local bike shop will be your best bet for walking you through the different options. Essentially how I chose the bike that was in the photo was I sent a list of my requirements to the bike shop and said, I need a bike that fits all of these requirements. And they said, here is your bike. And it was great. It was perfect. So they really are the experts and will know what's available in their stock and also what they would be able to order in special. I will also say that there's a bike company called Priority Cycles that has a specific winter commuting bike. I did consider them, but I wanted a step over frame, and they didn't have their winter package in a step over frame. It was only a top bar, and I needed a bike that I was going to be able to ride while heavily pregnant, so that was not going to work for me. So again, this is where sort of relaying with your local bike shop will be able to sort of work through some of the different options. But a lot of the bikes coming in from wintry countries will meet that need. There also is an increase in knowledge of belt drives, and I know Trek now has a bike with a belt drive, and then some of the pieces can be added aftermarket as well. How much would I spend on a winter beater bike? That's a good question. I have spent everything from $0 rescuing one off a balcony to about $150. I think probably the sweet spot is somewhere around $100 and save a little bit of money for that initial maintenance, just to make sure that it is truly rideable. If you're getting it from a reputable secondhand place and you know that it'll be rideable off the bat, then throw in a little bit extra, just for that knowledge that you're going to be able to ride it. There's a sort of a second part question there, which what is the bare minimum spec wise to look for? Does it fit you and does it move? Is sort of the bare minimum. Um, there's a huge range of quality on the bikes that I've ridden for winter cycling. One of my beater bikes had a freewheel that would freeze around -30. Um, I was riding in -30, so that is partly my fault. But that was certainly a downside of getting a less expensive bike. I have not had that with the greater investment, but I only made that increased investment in a dedicated winter bike after about 6 or 7 years of riding pretty consistently. So yeah, it's sort of what you want to get out of it will impact what you put into it. Do ski helmets also expire every 3 to 5 years? Probably. I should check that. I don't know. I don't think it actually says on my helmet. If it does, then my helmet is certainly expired. My guess is probably is the answer. If in doubt, assume yes. Were there any other questions, or you can raise your hand or put it into the chat.
Okay, that looks like that might be our questions for this lunch
Perfect.
hour. Thank you so much once again to EnviroCenter and Cassie and Felicity for that awesome presentation. Thank you all for participating and participating in the chat and asking all of these great questions, because I'm sure if someone else had the same question, you probably answered it for them. So that's great. And we will give you 8 minutes back to your lunch hour. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Now I get to go ride my bike.